I had this property downtown. I was living in the suburbs and I was renovating it. And I'd been staying in a whole bunch of short-term rentals. And I'm like, you know what? I want to move downtown. But I want to try this short-term rental thing. So I'm going to furnish it and put it up. And if it rents, then cool, I'll do that. But if not, I'll just move into it, right? So I put it up and it's just been booked like, every day, like just nonstop. I still have that one from 5 years ago. So after that, I started just looking for properties that worked as long-term rentals, have good like foundation, but that I could convert into short-term rentals. And so that's what I been focusing on for the last 5 years. So
yeah, and that's a key that we talk about a lot because yes, the short-term rentals make you substantially more money, but we always suggest you want to run the numbers both ways so that if regulations change or anything changes, something comes up, you're not going to be losing money if you have to rent it out on a 12-month lease. So What's up, everybody? My name's Mike Sjogren here with my co-host
Emmanuel Pani.
We're part of a group of specialized real estate investors you've probably never heard of.
We didn't start with deep pockets or wealthy families, and we don't rely on 401ks, mutual funds, or traditional real estate investing.
In fact, many of us don't even own the properties that fund our freedom. If you ask the money experts out there, they'd say what we do is impossible, yet it's happening every single day.
It's happening through a new niche called short-term rentals.
We are Short-Term Rental Nation, and these are our secrets. What's going on, STR Nation? Welcome back to another episode of the Short-Term Rental Secrets podcast. I'm your host, Mike Sjogren, here with my main man and brother from another mother, Mr. Emmanuel Pani. What is up, E?
My brother, life is good. Life is a blessing. Just closed on another unit yesterday. As our listeners know, I have my passion project, which is my apartment complex down in South Florida that I started working in as a maintenance guy 10 years ago. So closed on the 39 out of 40 unit yesterday. So there's one more to go. So we're at 97.5% ownership of the community. So that's been great. Very, very surreal moment, man. Like when you're there at the closing table telling the real estate attorney kind of what your life story has been. It feels like it's kind of flown by. But it was good.
Love that, man. Congrats. I know you've been pushing heavy on that for like a year and a half to try and acquire all of them. So
yeah, since we've known each other too, right? Like when we first met, I had 12.
Yeah.
5 years ago. So
yeah, love that, man. Well, I am very excited to bring on today's guest who we connected with through a mastermind that you are a part of, GoBundance. And without further ado, I'm just going to get right into his bio because I want to pick his brain on a lot of amazing things that he has going on. So today we have Tim Hubbard on the show with us. Tim started his career in real estate as an investment broker, selling multifamily and commercial properties in Northern California. He worked with a small team of 5 who completed cumulatively over $2 billion in transactions. He has been personally investing in real estate for the last 10 years and since has acquired a multi-million-dollar portfolio comprised primarily of small multifamily properties in multiple markets. He's traveled extensively throughout the world in over 70 countries and stayed in hundreds of different short-term rental accommodations. About 5 years ago, he realized the high returns that could be made from converting properties into furnished short-term rental units and renting them by the night. He founded and acts as CEO for Midtown Stays, a short-term rental accommodation company which has successfully accommodated over 15,000 guests with excellent reviews from all over the world. He continues to expand with the help of his teams and manages everything remotely from his home in Medellin, Colombia. He also teaches others to do the same thing and shows them how they can successfully increase their income 3, 4, or even 8 times by implementing the right strategies to convert existing long-term rentals into nightly rentals through his live events and podcast. He holds a degree in international business and an MBA from the University of California of Davis and is a co-founder of the Amazon best-selling book, Resilience, Turning Your Setback into a Comeback. Man, that is a hell of a bio. Welcome to the show, Tim.
Yeah, geez. Hey, thanks for having me, guys. Excited to be here.
Yeah, that's great.
Excited to be here. And congrats, Manuel. That's pretty awesome.
Thanks, man.
Congrats on closing on the new units. That's good to hear.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I absolutely love your guys' website, by the way. If you're looking to kind of see what Tim's properties, where they're at. It's midtownstays.com.
Cool.
Super clean website, great pictures. But yeah, Tim, why don't you tell us kind of like where the aha moment was?
Yeah. Well, like I guess in the intro said, I've been in real estate for quite a while and was doing traditional rentals for the first half of my career, I guess. And actually, working as a broker, and I had this property downtown. I was living in the suburbs and I was renovating it. And I'd been staying in a whole bunch of short-term rentals, and I'm like, you know what? I want to move downtown, but I want to try this short-term rental thing. So I'm going to furnish it and put it up. And if it rents, then cool, I'll do that. But if not, I'll just move into it, right? So I put it up, and it's just been booked like, every day, like just nonstop. I still have that one from 5 years ago. So after that, I started just looking for properties that worked as long-term rentals, have good like foundation, but that I could convert into short-term rentals. And so that's what I been focusing on for the last 5 years. So
yeah, and that's a key that we talk about a lot, because yes, the short-term rentals make you substantially more money, but we always suggest you want to run the numbers both ways, so that if regulations change or anything changes, something comes up, you're not going to be losing money if you have to rent it out on a 12-month lease. So that's huge.
Great point. Yeah, it's good. It's the best backup plan, right? I mean, you can feel safe and secure knowing you can always put long-term tenants in there. So
absolutely. Yeah. So what was the road, what has it been like over the last 5 years? So you started with that one unit. Now you're in three different markets: Sacramento, Memphis, and Oklahoma City. So what's that journey been for you as you started to scale that up?
Well, I was looking for properties outside of California because prices had gotten really high. I wasn't finding returns really there. So I kind of just set out and went to quite a few different places in the US, actually looking for long-term rentals again, because I wanted to just get some turnkey rentals and call it a day. But as I was looking for them in these other properties and meeting with management companies, I was staying in short-term rentals in these different cities. And I remember staying in one. I went out to Memphis, and I remember staying in this one, and I was paying them, I don't know, like $70-$80 a night or something at that time. And I'm like, I wonder how much this property costs. So I look it up, and I'm like, holy smokes, like this is a fraction of the cost of the properties in California, So just realized like the returns can be so much better just by changing the area. And so I ended up finding an 8-unit apartment building there that was fully rented with long-term tenants, but it was pretty it needed a lot of love, I guess you could say. So I actually left California and moved to Tennessee and just kind of worked on that first project with contractors and converted them all into short-term rentals. And then from there, I was just like, holy smokes, this is doing really well. So I kept looking for more properties. And then I've sold some stuff in California since and did some exchanges, and that kind of got me into Oklahoma. But basically, I was just looking for markets that had good fundamentals, as long-term rentals and population growth, and looked like they were headed in the right direction. So that's what brought me out to Tennessee and Oklahoma City.
Yeah, that's great. So for our listeners, so there's a couple different models that people usually use. From what your story is, you are more of the buy and hold investor, right? So all of these properties that you have, you own, and then you choose to do vacation rentals with. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Although, I know about the other ways to make money with short-term rentals, obviously, lease arbitrage, and I think that can be really good as well. I just got today a lease back from an owner who has 10 units in Memphis. Like, it used to be an old hotel, and he converted all of them, and he's got a restaurant below. And he reached out and said, hey, would you be interested in leasing these? And I met with him a couple times, and we just worked a deal. So I'm going to do the lease arbitrage one as well. I've got some good outs in the leases if things don't work out, but it's the same operations, right? They're operated exactly the same way, just a little bit of a different model. Yeah.
Yeah. And I love that. And I love that because the vibe that I get from you is this very chill vibe. I'm like, why not? I'm just going to do this. But like at the same time, like I'm the same way. And that's a lot of the times how you get shit done, right? Like it doesn't have to be, this crazy, especially real estate. Like I tell people all the time, real estate is a really dumb business. Like it's very, very simple. People overcomplicate it, and sometimes you just gotta be like, I'm gonna jump in, and if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out, and I'm gonna turn it back into long-term rental. So you live in Medellin, Colombia, like South America.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I thought Mike said.
South America, yeah.
So-
South of you.
South of me, even. Yeah, I'm usually South America. For most Americans, Florida is like the pretty much. But yeah. So what does your team look like? Like, do you have cleaners? You have VAs? What kind of walk us through that?
So it's a little different in each of the cities. You know, in the Sacramento and Oklahoma, I have less short-term rentals, so we use like professional housekeeping. Although at Sacramento, I have someone that's worked for me for quite a long time. That's where I started. And so she kind of just helps manage everything. I use Guesty online, so that helps with a lot of our reservations and all that. But my main team is in Memphis, where I have most of my properties. So yeah, we have multiple housekeepers. We have some maintenance contractors that we work with really frequently. And then I have another buddy, it's like an operations manager. He's actually virtual from California. And aside from that, and some other virtual, positions like bookkeeping and, accountants and lawyers and stuff like that, it's pretty much on the ground. It's just housekeeping and maintenance,
Yeah, that's such a good point. Cause I see so many people, they're afraid to kind of go outside of their market, or there's this fear of like, oh, I need it to be in my back door, short-term rentals, long-term rentals, whatever. Right. But the beauty of this business model is you can run a really lean operation, right? Like you need the boots on the ground, like those contractors and cleaning crews, but the back end of like running the reservations and communication, when you have the right technology and maybe a VA or two, like in place, like it's seamless. Like if you know how to set up the systems. So
yeah, for sure. And it allows you to go, like if you set it up in one market, you can just use that same system for whatever market you go to. Which is a really cool part. And then you're just finding, the housekeeping and maintenance. So yeah, it does make it a lot easier to scale and to kind of branch out,
Yeah. And so just to give us a little clarity, how many properties do you have in each of those markets so we can get a sense of like where you're concentrated?
I guess I just sold 8 properties actually, which was pretty cool, but they were like my least performing ones and they had a ton of equity. So I've got some other plans for that, but so I've got 50 units, but not all of them are short-term, 32 short-term. I only have 4 left in California. I have a 9-unit building in Oklahoma. That's a really cool, like historic building. And I've only converted 1 into a short-term rental. I was going to do the whole building, but that little COVID thing happened in March, and just
that little global pandemic thing happened.
Yeah, so kind of just kept the long-term tenants in there for the meantime. But I would say when things pick up, I'll probably plan is convert all those, and then the rest are in Memphis.
Nice, that's great. I love that. And so, are you still doing the commercial brokerage stuff, or are you just letting the properties kind of fund the lifestyle now?
Yeah, just the properties. When I left California, I quit being a broker, but it was an awesome experience. I mean, we did all kinds of really cool deals. We only did investments, and it was mainly apartment buildings, but we did shopping centers and land and warehouse and everything. So I got a ton of good experience, and for underwriting things and due diligence and all that. So
I was going to ask that question, right? Because being a commercial broker like that, you really learn how to run the numbers and understand that. So how did that, when you're analyzing markets, especially for a lot of the newer folks that aren't experienced in real estate, what are some of the things, like I know you mentioned population growth, job growth, things like that, but when you're analyzing the numbers, like it's almost like you have a different eye for it because you've been doing it at such a high level. So what's kind of your thought process when you're analyzing deals?
Well, I think it all comes down to the numbers, right? So if I'm looking at these properties as a long-term rental first, then I need to know what the rents are. And if they're vacant, what the market rents are. So we can find those pretty easily with rent comps and stuff like that. So that's the big one. If it's already leased, we just want to make sure people are actually paying the leases. So get a copy of the lease, get a copy of the rent rolls, and then aside from that, our taxes, property taxes, and utilities, and maybe any sort of common area expenses the property would have if it's a commercial property. There's all kinds of calculators these days. We can just, I have a cool one I use on my iPad. I basically just plug everything in, and as it is actually, and then plug in what I think it can do. And for me, for a short-term rental, if I don't think I can do at least like 3 times the long-term rent, then I'm probably not going to convert it into a short-term rental. But yeah, I think one of the things that I discovered leaving California too is, a big piece of the investment puzzle, I think, is legislations and places that are landlord friendly. And the places that aren't landlord friendly, I've found that those are typically the places that are more strict on short-term rentals too, at least in a lot of places. So, when I went to Tennessee, for example, it was just so much easier to work there. I remember calling the city and I'm like, because they made it illegal in Sacramento, actually, where I'd started. There was no rules, and then all of a sudden they came up with a rule, and now unless you're an owner occupant, you can't technically do it. So unless you have a permit, but there was I tried for 6 months to get a permit out there, and nothing was happening. So I went to Tennessee, and I remember calling into the city. And someone picked up the phone at the city, which was surprising, first of all. And I'm like, hey, I'm looking at doing these short-term rentals, and long story short, we can do them there, and it was easy. But it just made it a lot easier. So I think the legislation and that is can make a big difference too, where the properties are.
Yeah,
people ask us all the time, like, how do we get around the legislation? I'm like, just don't even try. Go somewhere where you can do it, and just make your life so much easier.
Yeah, just move.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Especially you California people. I find it so funny because we have this running joke of the California people are like, it is the best weather, is amazing. I'm like, have you come to Florida? We have just as great of a weather, and we're not slammed by regulations. We've been open this entire time, right? Going to the gym and restaurants are back open and everything else. This is just out of my own personal curiosity, have you thought about expanding operations in Colombia since you're there?
I've thought about it. They're actually really strict here in Medellin, where I am. Their regulations are pretty strict. And then the other thing in terms of investment, as a foreigner, you can't really get financing here. So it's all cash. And that just, if we're getting a loan in the state for, we're putting 20% down and we're leveraging 5 times, and it's really the deals down here would have to do 5 times as good, I mean, to kind of even equal what we can do there. And the market here, I bought property here actually before too, and so I've gone through that process, and it's just totally different. There's no MLS, nothing's transparent. You get multiple answers from people about the same thing. I was working with Colombian agents and some expat agents, and most of them only have a few properties that they're listing. Some will even list the same property for different prices. So it's just a total mess, not that you can't find good deals down here. And I do think that this city has a lot going for it. But in terms of ease, just so much easier, and return, just so much easier in the US from what I found.
Oh, that's so funny. I can see it in their in their deed. It's your property line is from the one tree to the other tree, and then back to the big rock. And you're like, what big rock? Which? Yeah. What are you talking about? That's amazing. And every time I love asking that to people, they invest and they live out of the country, because it really reminds me of the beauty of living here in the States and how easy it is to do business, get loans, and really grow. And on that perspective, that for me, the States, being born and raised in Italy, it's also very similar, right? Business there is just hard. Buying houses is hard. Nothing is as easy as it is here when it comes to lending and growth and just opportunities.
Right. Yeah, and especially now, I mean, we have the lowest interest rates in history. It's almost like free money if you can get a loan for a property, and if the rent's paying it, then it's you're getting a free property, it's just It's yeah, we've got it really good as U.S. citizens for sure.
So what's your goals now for like 2021? Are you still looking for that blended portfolio of some short term, some long term? Like kind of walk us through your thought process on what your outlook is for 2021.
Yeah, I've kind of got, I guess, like three things going right now. So this lease arbitrage is new. They're still under construction, but they're supposed to finish in like March. So I'm thinking by April, hopefully May or April, hopefully have that all up and going. So that'll be cool. That's 10 units in a really cool spot of town, above a restaurant. So that'll be fun. I bought like a small retail center last year, or old strip center, and I'm putting a laundromat in it. So that's in Memphis, and it's gonna, my main housekeeper there in Memphis goes to laundromat multiple times a week, right? So to do all of our linens for our properties, kind of. It's not a laundromat yet, but it will be. So I've already demoed the whole thing. Like it needed a lot of work too. But it's actually in a pretty decent area. And so I've been learning a lot about the laundromat business, and I'm hoping to have that up by July, which will help serve all the short-term rentals, because we're going to have like a pickup and delivery component to it. So you can just drop off fresh linens, pick up the dirty ones from the property. So that's probably my biggest thing this year. And then I am going to be, most likely, it's not like 100%, but probably exchanging my last units out of California for somewhere else.
Nice.
Acquiring some more properties.
I love the entrepreneurial brain when it comes to short-term rentals, right? Because we think vertically integrated at all times, right? So, and it's funny, I had never heard somebody say, well, like, yeah, I'm just gonna have a laundromat, right? Like, because that makes sense, right? Like, it's just like, as short-term rental operators, there's all the service business that goes into short-term rentals or houses. You can literally grow and branch out. We had another guest that had a carpet cleaning business, and that's where he found a lot of properties that he ended up owning and managing. And it's just so brilliant. And I love it. I love the fact that you're getting into a completely different industry, and I'm sure there's a lot to learn, but that is one of the more profitable businesses. Dry cleaners and laundromats have made people a lot of money.
Yeah, originally it was kind of like a joke. I'm like, oh, we should just get our own laundromat. And then I mentioned it to my broker, and he's like, hey, this property came up. I think it might be a good location for a laundromat. And it looked like a disaster. I mean, it'd been vacant for like 4 or 5 years probably. And I'm like, well, but it's close to all my properties. So I was like, well, maybe I just get it and put some machines in there. You know what I mean? And we'll do them there instead of doing it somewhere else. So I'm like, okay. So we kind of started the process. And then the more I started looking into laundromats, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is like a really fascinating business. It can do really well. And so now it's gone into this, like, now I'm going to use like almost all the space for the laundromat, and I'm pretty excited about. But it is one of the, more challenging pieces with the housekeeping component, right? Because, it's hard to keep them consistent, especially if you're using like residential machines. It also, the drying time, if you're in a bunch of different units, a lot of times housekeepers are just waiting around for stuff to dry. So I think it's going to help quite a bit, make sure it's more consistent. I mean, those machines clean better too, because they're hotter temperatures and they're commercial. So it should help out quite a lot, I think. So I'm excited for that.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, plus you'll have the space. You could almost have like your full inventory. I know people that'll rent storage containers or whatever, just to have like an inventory of linens and towels and just pick up, drop off, boom. So are you gonna? That's a
good point. It has a store. It has another unit we actually turned into a storage already. So it's like a centralized storage. So yeah.
And that's the beauty of when you have enough units in one market, you get those economies of scale. And right when I got going, it was nice. Like we got in 5 different states pretty quickly, improved the concept, and it's working great. But I don't have the economies of scale in all of those markets, right? So I've got 2 units in North Carolina, 1 in Florida, 2 in Dallas, 2 in New Hampshire, a bunch in Massachusetts. But when you have 30 or 20 in a location, you definitely get those economies of scale that way. We were just interviewing a gentleman. He's got 300 units over in the UK now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And he's going to 500 this year. And the economies of scale, I mean, it's a big operation now, but when you have those economies, in-house cleaning staff, things like that, he can just smash everybody else from a price standpoint on those things. But with the laundromat, are you going to run that as like a separate business too? Like coin op, full on laundromat for revenue? Okay.
Yeah. So it'll be open to the public. I don't plan on actually using a lot of the new machines you can do without coins now. So don't plan on doing any of that. And then we'll use it for our own stuff. So I'll have like a drop-off service. But then I also want to do the pickup and delivery, which is really cool because that's going to hit like a different income demographic, right? You have like the public coming in that is using it themselves, and then the whole other side of the demographic that you can do the pickup and delivery, which we're going to do anyways to deliver to the properties. So,
you could even have a whole niche just on short-term rentals. People just literally having a whole business just for that service.
Totally. I was actually using a service like that. I mean, I've tried out a lot of different things over the days, and they just weren't doing a really good job, I guess. So we started, housekeepers are doing it themselves in the laundromat. And so, but yeah, I'm excited for it, I guess.
Out of curiosity,
it's an investment too, right? I mean, the cool thing is it's like I own the property. So the better my laundromat business does, the more valuable the business is, the commercial property.
And that's exactly what I was going to ask you. Like, I have no clue. Like, what are profit margins on a laundromat, right? Like, what's a good ROI on a laundromat?
So I think a lot of people make it at least like 20% cash on cash, but up to and up much higher than that too. And that's before accounting and that's just as a public laundromat, not doing the pickup and delivery. I've been seeing quite a few people that are doing so well with their pickup delivery, especially in like times like this with COVID, where everyone wants everything delivered, where they're using their laundry the whole time and they just shut down the public side of it because they're using it the whole time. So the pickup and deliver really has a lot of room to grow because it basically can hit a whole city, really. So.
Yeah, and you charge a premium for it. So,
and it's also like a lot of people do it on like a subscription, or once they do it once or twice, then they continue to do it. You know what I mean? Because they trust the service. They're like, hey, I hate doing laundry anyways. This is perfect. So it's pretty, at least from what I've seen, it's pretty consistent when you get when it's running properly.
I'm fascinated because I've been trying to find a service that'll pick up my laundry and deliver it back because I hate doing it. We don't want to have a housekeeper come in just because of COVID and everything. So I'm like, I just want somebody to pick it up, wash it, and take it back.
Yeah. I know.
I love that.
So that's great. So, I mean, for you, and again, just to kind of recap, so you've got kind of a lean team in place. Who's handling the guest communication? Is that ops manager in California, I think you said?
Yeah, so we've got Guesties the first step, right? So they handle, we pay for the receptionist service. And we try to answer everyone's questions, of course, like before they even have them. So we have automated messages that go out to check-in instructions. We use digital guidebooks. We do everything we can to get them the information they need. So we really don't, and you guys know this, like a lot of people will instant book. They get your instructions and they check in, and a lot of our guests we're not even talking to sometimes, right? Outside of the message we send them automatically. So Guesties our first step, and that handles the majority of everything, including all the reservations. So they do 100% until we get the reservations, and then they do everything they can after that as well. If there's something they can't answer, then that would go to Jeff. And then if not, or a housekeeper, depending on the market, we have it go into a couple different ways, but we use a business phone line that they call. And if the first person's not available, then it goes to the second or then the third.
Which phone system is that, just out of curiosity?
we're using phone.com. And it's pretty good, basic. I mean, it's a little tricky getting it set up with Airbnb because they don't recognize like virtual numbers.
That's what I was going to ask you, because I use UMA and they don't let me put my UMA number in there.
So I have like another actual phone line that I pay for, and it just forwards.
Genius. I love it.
Yeah.
See, little tidbit. I love these episodes because I always get a nugget out of it too, selfishly.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
that's awesome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
Okay, cool.
where, as a real estate, as a former real estate broker, I'm very curious to hear your opinion on the hospitality industry, and where do you see it going back 2021, and where do you see some opportunities? I think we're starting to get a decent amount of listeners that are real estate agents kind of space. So really, kind of going back to your old self and your old life. What are some tips that you would give people, and also just your outlook on the year?
Yeah, no, that's a good question, and it's gosh, things have been changing so much, but I would, the hotel industry, no doubt about it, they've been hit harder than almost all of them, up there with office and stuff. So or worse. I mean, basically the worst time they've had in our lifetimes. This is the worst time for travel, right? We've sort of had an unfair advantage, I think, as short-term rental operators, because we haven't had a lot of these restrictions that the hotels have, at least in the markets that I'm in. So, these hotels that have been locked up, a lot of them have gone out of business already. And a lot of them are going to continue to go out of business, sadly, unless things open up. So I think at the same time, because people haven't been able to stay in hotels, people are still traveling, right? But it's mainly more drive to destinations and stuff like that. I think a lot of people have actually stayed in short-term rentals maybe for the first time this year because they wanted a place, maybe it was the only option, or they just like the idea of having their own private interests and not being near communal areas or in elevators or anything like that. So I think at the same time that hotels have had the worst year ever, short-term rentals have gotten a little bit more visibility, and the supply on the hotel side's gone down a little bit. I mean, there's some really big hotels that closed down, unfortunately, already. And, mainly in dense areas, like Manhattan and Los Angeles, like Beverly Hills, places where some of these hotels have been around forever, and I think, unfortunately, if the restrictions and stuff don't loosen up, that more hotels are going to go out of business. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for short-term rental operators because we have less supply in the market. We have more people discovering short-term rentals. We have more people working from home than ever, so they can go stay at places longer, like a staycation or something like that. So, and I don't know about you guys, but I did pretty well this year. Still, I took a drop in occupancy, but it was still pretty good. A lot better than the long-term rentals. And that's without even having people traveling internationally right now, for the most part. So when that comes back and everything loosens, I mean, I'm pretty bullish. I think that it'll be really good for short-term rentals.
Yeah, 100%.
I 100% agree as well.
I want to touch on the hotel thing too, because I actually got in the hotel space this year. We bought a boutique hotel in February, but we converted it and leveraged all the short-term rental systems. So like we don't have a front desk, so it's all contactless check-in. And we did really well because I think it was just a different experience because people don't want to wait in line. They didn't want to be around a lot of people, but if you can go right to your room, and I mean, the location's amazing. Like it's literally beachfront. So the location's awesome, but like that's our play. Like we're closing on a 22 unit in March, where we're going to implement the same strategy. So the challenge or the opportunity is lenders don't want to touch it. But if we target these mom and pop sellers that have owned it for generations, they own it outright, and we can get like seller financing or get a little creative with it, and we have some capital to renovate them and implement the systems. Like we doubled the NOI on that property in 9 months. It was crazy. Yeah. So I think that's awesome. Where it's somebody's pain point, it's another person's opportunity or an opportunity to solve their problem. Like if they just want to retire or get some consistent seller financing income. Like I think I don't see that working necessarily on the 200 unit hotels, but if you can find those 15 to 40 or 50 units, I think it could be a really cool business model for a lot of people.
I agree. And I guess when I was saying hotels, I was referring to those larger hotels, the 100+ unit ones where all the units are identical or they're very similar. I think there's a good lot of opportunity for boutique hotels, and even kind of with the millennial generation, so like we kind of like more experience type stuff, and we've seen hotels like design hotels and things like this popping up where they're building a lot of their hotel rooms differently and putting kitchens in them and stuff like that. So yeah, I think those smaller boutique hotels, I think there's a lot of opportunity. I'd love to have one if an opportunity comes up. Yeah, I think it'd be really cool. And yeah, you can really cut down your expenses if you run it as a short-term rental because you take the front desk out. You don't have the employee costs that you would have. So yeah,
it's crazy. We had a hotel consultant on last month, and I was out of my personal curiosity. I was like, what's the average like OPEX on a hotel? And he was like, it's between 65 and 70% because there's so much overhead. And I'm like, that's nuts. Like we were at 41% this year. So just reducing the expenses that much, never mind getting on all the other platforms and marketing it properly. Like it's just wild. So I think, again, I don't think maybe on the massive scale it works, but it's almost like, that block that you're about to master lease, like it's kind of that size community is money for this type of opportunity.
I think so. Yeah, this one I'm doing the lease on used to be a hotel, used to be a boutique hotel. So yeah, smaller 10 units, it's got the commercial space downstairs with the restaurant and people be able to go into. So yeah, I think spaces like that can do really well. Yeah, for sure.
Love that.
Awesome.
Well, I want to be respectful of your time, but before we get into our last question, first I want to acknowledge you and thank you for coming on and sharing all your knowledge with us and all your success in the real estate industry, man. This has been a lot of fun. And where can folks, learn more about you and what you got going on and see some of your properties?
Yeah, so Rest Methods, I've been last year I started doing some live events which were a lot of fun, and we actually went through some of my properties, rented a tour bus, and fortunately I haven't been able to do that because of COVID stuff, but that website's restmethods.com. And I also have a podcast that I started a little over a year ago. It's called Short-Term Rental Riches. So people can check those out. Those are like short, quick episodes for the most part, like 10 to 15 minutes, just like an actionable item that I either use in my business or that I'm exploring that could potentially help someone with a short-term rental. And then my management company is midtownstays.com. So that's where we have our properties listed, I guess.
Well, we'll link all this up in the show notes for folks to check all this good stuff out.
Cool.
Love it. So the last question that we ask all of our guests is, what is your number one secret to success with short-term rentals?
I guess this might go beyond short-term rentals a little bit, but I would just say it's consistency, just working at it a little bit every day and just constantly improving it, and that in terms of growing your portfolio and stuff too. I mean, we always have our ups and downs, but if we just keep doing a little bit every day, then, before we know it, we're in these cool projects and things are going well. So I would say just consistency, continually working at it.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you again, Tim. Really appreciate you coming on. I'm definitely going to check out the podcast and all these different sites when we get off here, and cool. Looking forward to keeping in touch and seeing what you got in the pipeline for 2021.
For sure. Thank you, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely.
Yeah, man. Absolute pleasure. Cheers.
Hey, STR Nation, if you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to hit that subscribe button and leave us a review. And in the comments, let us know what topics you want us to cover on upcoming episodes, and we'll make sure to get that in the books for you. And if you really want to learn how to launch, automate, and scale your short-term rental business, if you want to go deeper, then check out our free masterclass at strsecrets.com.